Welcome, everyone. Today's conversation is one that I've been really excited to have. Last week, an old friend called me up and asked me about um, the B2B space specifically, and we were talking about strategies and how you go to market, and we were talking about tech companies today. So, in this space, the person that is really a strong voice, and I think that has a framework that I'm in full agreement with. Everything that we think we know, Victor has kind of written also in starting a sport tech company. It's exciting, but it's also very unforgiving. I've learned the most important lesson that he shared with me was what he did at Dartfish, which we'll talk about today. And he is currently at SportsEdTV. It's a great, uh, uh, it's basically like Coursera or a university for sports skills. Strongly encourage you guys to take a look. I want to dig into those lessons today. Similar to what we did with Dr. Juris and human movement and biomechanics, we're going to take a look at go-to-market business frameworks. So thank you again ahead of time for the opportunity to speak to you, Victor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Thanks. So to help us get started, what I want to do is you talked about in that phone call that we had that technology is not a product. And you were talking about Dartfish and that you talked about the simulcam and you talked about how incredible it was in overlaying technology, but you still struggled to sell it at that point. Tell me what happened that you took a product, like to the Olympic Committee, where you sat there for 3 days with coaches and that you had this interaction with, uh, and you made this breakthrough.
Yes. So we started Dartfish with one very strong technology, and that was in end of 98. And the engineers were very passionate about their technology. And being from Switzerland, they said, well, what if instead of having one skier going downhill, we could have two at the same time? And what if we could basically have the skier going downhill and racing against the first one instead of having a watch, right? And we even call the technology video finish. That's the famous simulcam you see at the NFL Combine every year, where they compare, for the 40-yard dash and other, exercises they do. And it was very cool, amazing technology. We sold it to our first big deal was the 1999 World Championships in Vail, and I remember selling it to NBC. They were very excited, and that's how the name Simulcam came, because the NBC president said, video finish is fun, but we'd rather call it Simulcam. So we went with the flow. Anyway, based on that, we were like, the market of coaching is huge. We all had a background in sports. Myself, I was in the top 10 in Switzerland in weightlifting growing up. And the other people, even the engineer who developed not SportsEdTV, but Simulcam, was a ski instructor. And we all said, that's an amazing tool for ski instructors, for sports. Imagine if you can analyze the best against your athletes that are going to become the best. So it was a fantastic technology. And we sold it to the Swiss ski team. The guy we found was a nerd. He would take plastic transparent pieces and draw on the TV. He had a big TV screen, draw the line, and then look at the video in real time. So he was doing the simulcam already manually. So when we met him, he was so excited. We're like, wow, we have a market. Well, he loves it. He's the first guy we met. We have a market. So we went, we created a nice CD-ROM that you can install. And we said, okay, let's put a price on it and let's try to sell it. And we hired a team in the US. We knew that the US, as a European company, you're like, the US is the biggest sports market in the world. And you hear that all the time from many founders. So we hired a team in the US and we told them, you go and you better sell it. And we wanted 500 units the first year. And the head of the US team before I joined said, oh, 500 is nothing. We're going to sell 1,000. We're selling the piece of software for $6,000. And after 1 year, she sold a few. The American ski team, obviously, and a few others. And I was like, what is going on? Why are people not buying? I was still sitting in Switzerland. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna come to the US. And she organized a very good meeting with the US Olympic Committee because they love the simulcam, obviously. They were preparing for Salt Lake City. And that was a year later since the launch. And I said, I'm going to go and sit with them. I want to sit with the people, who need technology. And I spent 3 days of listening. And, and then I came in saying, oh, the simulcam is great. And they're like, yes, Victor, we love simulcam, but let us tell you what we really need. So I started saying, okay, how do you use video? What, they started telling me. I came back with 20 pages. And out of the 20 pages, simulcam was 1% of the needs they had. Came back to Switzerland, and I said, guys, that's what we need if we want to have a chance on this market. And less than a year later, we launched Dartfish 2.0, which was the first product we could definitely put on the market.
It's interesting because I hope people that are in this or considering to be in this market space, the MVP was everyone needs it. I don't understand why people don't want to. So
Exactly.
1.0, just because you think it's going to be adopted and you realize the measurables, those lag indicators, an owner either could sit there and either place the blame or actually roll up their sleeves and dive in, and that's kind of what you did.
Yeah.
But how do you keep your ego out of the way long enough to honestly assess the situation?
It's hard. You get blinded. So my point is, we had a great technology, which is still great today. People see the simulcam. I
Yeah,
was watching simulcam a week ago at the NFL Combine, and you see the number of comments saying, "This is great. Is that new?" No, that's almost
yeah,
30 years old. But 30 years old. I mean, imagine, and
yeah,
it's still very cool. People love it.
yeah.
But we are blinded by our technology, and that's something that many, many founders see. They think that they have invented the best bread slicer ever, and they're like, that's everybody's gonna love it as much. And it's your baby. And basically, I think you become deaf, you become blind and deaf, and you just want to force it down the throat of people. And that's the first mistake, is technology. And that's what I put on my post. I said technology is not a product. Technology can be extremely cool, but it's not a product. Look at
Yeah.
the iPhone. What made the iPhone amazing is ease of use. The technology behind it is amazing, but Steve Jobs didn't come and say, "Oh, look, I have a big screen, and you can touch the screen and do all kind of things." And so what? He sold, the use of
He
the phone, of making things easier for you. He really understood what people were going to do. This is
he
amazing.
wasn't first to market though with that product.
The,
If you really think about it,
yeah,
Microsoft had PDAs.
yeah.
Because that's really what a smartphone is. It's a PDA. He's like, it's missing the phone part.
I had the Palm Pilot, and
Yeah,
Palm, they said, no, people
yeah.
want to have buttons. They want to type with their thumbs, and
BlackBerry.
so exactly. But again, what I don't want to get into the history of Apple, but what I'm saying is, founders don't think technology is
Yep.
a product. The product is much more than just
But
technology.
but you hear this term all the time, right? Total addressable market, the TAM.
Yeah.
Founders love to talk about that in pitch decks. What
Yes.
we chuckled about this because you should determine your pricing strategy based on that. But can you walk me through like the relationship between market size and price point?
Yes. So, uh, and we spoke about it the other day. I like the
Yeah,
TAM. The TAM is always nice. Oh,
yeah,
there are 70 million people playing golf in the world, right? And I've seen so many golf products coming out and people coming saying 70 million. So what they do is they do the TAM on an Excel sheet, and they're like, I'm gonna get 70. I mean, I may have 70 million potential customers, and I'm gonna sell something for 5,000, $1,000 a year. That's billions of dollars. That's my TAM. And it's like, okay, are you sure that 70 million or the entire population of people playing golf could be somebody that you can service? And that's when the SAM comes into place, right? The How many people can you really service through your efforts? And then you'll see that, and if that's big enough, then you have a market. Now, the TAM and the SAM are important to really say, do I have a product? Do I have a market? I may have a product, but I may not have a market. If I have a product that only 100 people are going to use, I still may have a product. I mean, you have people selling Paganis and Ferraris, and they don't
you
sell
price it, yeah, you price it just a
millions.
lot.
So you have to.
Yeah,
That's what I want to say is that basically, if you look at the TAM and you're like, now I may have only 100 potential clients, but I'm going to sell them $1 million per month, then you have a market. If you're if the potential that you have is in the millions of people or hundreds of millions of people, and you have a freemium product or sponsor advertising supported product or a very low price, you have a market as well. So always look at how many potential serviceable clients you have, and then you have to define what pricing is going to be, because either you sell at a very high price to a few or at a lower price to many, but don't be at a pretty high price to a few, to many, because then, or to the middle, because then I don't want to say it here on the podcast, but I'm going to say it still. You have B2 shit instead of having B2B or B2C, and that's
that's
never working.
right. It's okay. It's not for kids. This is it's okay. uh, it's building innovation, right? It's not really about building on behavior, and but there's a balance to it that I'm hearing. You generally to a new market, that how you need to basically fit it in how to that end customer wants to use the product. So you talked about pricing as an example. I want to make 2 million and I have so many units. That's going to help me define my pricing. And if my TAM supports it, then I could establish a pricing strategy. How do I balance that to the market uh, fit for an end consumer? How does that look like? And how does it work?
Look first of all at the competition, and competition may not be a competitive product. How many of these apps and services have you seen where coaches said, I love it, but I'm still using Excel because Excel
Yeah,
is free, or Google Sheet is free.
yeah.
And you're like, yeah, but I can save so much time. It's like, yeah, I have everything prepared in Excel. I'm not going to change. So when you're solving a pain, and if the pain is very high and the benefits are amazing, I'm gonna pay for the price, for the right price. But if at the same time I can do it, cheaper, because some people have so many resources, and one of the problems we see in sports, and if we focus on sports here, is people look at the budgets at Division 1 level but they don't realize that they're not unlimited. And when you speak about technology, they
Yeah.
have a certain budget. And a lot of these startups come and say, yeah, but you're spending so much on the head coach. The football head coach is making millions. I'm sure you can spend a little bit less, but still in the same,
Right.
factor
Right.
for a technology. And that never works, right?
That
So,
reminds me of a story of in a team meeting with a company where the CEO couldn't understand that why were we selling more to universities because an average university student pays 65,000 to go there for a year. So therefore, you should be selling so many. And that's where it's a misunderstanding of TAM and SAM,
yeah,
but then also product fit, right? Um, their soccer team or hockey team or football team have something else already. Or to your point, they already use something that is, they're not going to change because they've been using it for years,
yeah.
and um, coaches are pretty much set in their ways. If the recipe gives you that great loaf of bread, why am I going to change the recipe? You know, it you talked about on that call, I couldn't stop thinking about this. You were talking about scaling. You talked about going from 10 to 100 to
Yeah.
1,000, and clients. And it sounds simple for like the founders, but they often, they want to skip steps, right? They want to like you mean you had a similar experience with Dartfish. You were like, I want 500 first year.
Yeah.
What does it actually like? What is it, when you're making 10 clients truly happy by following these steps, what do you know is the right scale and that you've earned the right scale?
So, first of all, you need to find people who are spending the money to be your client, because you always have people who are going to be happy to have free stuff, and they're all going to tell you, if I use it, everybody else in the market's going to use it. And you're like, yes, but if you use it for free, I don't know if you're a real client. That's the first thing. So I think if you have a good product that's going to help you, you're going to spend the money. Now you can always pay these people back for the work they're going to do helping you designing and refining the product. But I'd rather have the first year or the first month 10 happy clients are using it. If the product is being used on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or monthly basis, doesn't matter. If it depends on what you do. If you have an assessment product and you assess your athletes only once a month, then once a month is enough. But if they every time they do an assessment they start using it and it makes a big difference, then you have a winner. So that's very important. And I don't believe you can do a good job if you focus today on, oh, I want 1,000 clients. And you're like, okay, so what? You may sell 1,000 units. I remember selling a lot of units because we had this effect of, Division One school. Like one of my first team was Stanford football. And, it's a good football team. It's not one of the big, the big, big, big ones, but it's a very good football team. And because I sold to Stanford, other coaches were like, "Oh, if they're buying it, I need it." And we didn't spend the time training them, telling them how to use it and getting the feedback that you become a shelfware. So it's better to have 10 clients who are really using it. And then based on that, you refine the product, you sprint, you modify it, and then you get to your 100 clients. Then starting with 100, where only a few are going to use it, because then you really impact your brand. You impact the scalability in the future. So you go to 1, 10, 100, and then you can start scaling thousands and 10,000 if you have a product that goes into these numbers. But that's what I recommend, is make it work for a few, really understand the process. Don't try to change behavior. That's one of the mistakes people are doing. They are inventing a new way of doing things. And we suffered at Dartfish at the very beginning because we were selling a video software solution in sports where a lot of coaches didn't have a camera. So imagine you go to your first trade show and you tell coaches, this is what you can do. And they're like, this is amazing. But how do I do that? Well, when you film and they look at you and they say, I don't film. I know it's hard to say because we all have a phone today and they, but even today, I guarantee you, a lot of coaches don't really film practice sessions.
And you're not talking about everything either, right? You're talking about something that you can baseline, screen, track, trend that's going to make an impact on the outcome. And the Olympians get it because they spend 4 years of their lives committed to a 1% increase.
Yes.
Which is a game changer, as opposed to, it's taken a long time. I would like to think that colleges have made an improvement, but like you're talking about like that experience of, and what you're clearly defining is out of those 10, that's your MVP, right? You hear that term.
Yes.
It's such a misunderstood concept in the startup culture. You've defined it as a solution that to a painful problem that you wanted to really focus on the most common mistakes, really, that you were seeing as a founder, to make them think that they've built the MVP as well, but they really haven't, because you were using it as an opportunity for product development, because that's really what it is. You're doing product development, and what old-fashioned R&D is part of the after sales and sales side of this in product development.
Yes.
Companies don't do it enough. I just feel like that's why it's so misunderstood. So, what have you seen? Like, what did you learn in that process of MVP, of going from 10 to 100?
So one of the key challenges is listening to too many of the first users that are not representative of the population you go after. So there's a challenge going after, I call them the nerds. The people are going to use technology, whatever the technology can be, they want to be the first one to use it. And they're going to go through hoops to really make it work. And the challenge is that they may bring you to a path that is a wrong path, because you only have a small portion of these nerds. And then the other people are going to say, I can't, I don't even understand technology this way. And we made that mistake because we are so happy to find the people who would just swallow whatever we were telling them what to do, that they would use it. So you have to be very careful with that, saying, you know what, you love it, and then you're asking me to develop features that, again, 99% of the people are never going to use. So that's another, and I'm sure you have seen it with many of the companies you work with. I would love to be able to measure this. I would like to be able to measure that. And you're like, oh yes. So you go back to your engineers and you say, they need this by tomorrow, and they need that by tomorrow, and and then you keep developing. I'm going to give you an example. We had the first overlay in golf, and people love the overlay. And then one coach, a very famous one, was using any product on the surface of the earth, was saying, when I overlay, I would like to be able to extract one of the golfers and move him around. So, it's not completely overlay, but move it a little bit around. So we put an engineer doing an extracting tool to be able to extract a golfer, and 99% of the people didn't care about that. They wanted something simpler. So there's a danger. Make sure that you have the first 10 clients that are not necessarily the crazy nerds, that normal people, normal users. You have to take your SAM or your, and say, okay, I'm targeting these 100,000 coaches as an example, and I'm going to find people that are representative of the 100,000, not the people are always going to use everything under the sun.
Yeah, I learned that the painful way with heart rate monitoring. We sold really well initially to the NHL, MLS, and professional overseas teams, but like the U.S. went kicking and screaming down that path to where now all of a sudden heart rate and heart rate variability are in vogue, and I'm sitting there going, we were doing it in the 1990s, you know. It, and I get you've talked about also that the other side of this in the founder story is great product marketing, having a great person
Yes,
uh, adding your team. What does that look like in a sport tech company?
yes.
Uh, and how does a founder bring their voice to it? I think you as a founder have brought your voice to the market space. Uh, it is a very disciplined approach, but you see it in how you run your social media and your YouTube channel and everything. It's impressive.
Thank you.
So, what does it look like
Yes.
to a founder group?
So the product marketing manager is a key piece, especially in a startup. Uh, but the challenge you have in many startups are led by CTOs, by engineers. They're the one inventing the technology after all. And they know it all. And they don't respect marketing as much because it's not something they really understand. They just want to push technology. And the danger is sometimes if the development is exciting, they're like, oh, this is exciting. I would like to do that. And you're like, okay, hold on, hold on. The market is not asking for that. People don't need it, but it's exciting to develop. So if you don't create a group where you have a product marketing manager, the product marketing manager, the good one is somebody who has a good technology background, can speak to the engineers, but understands what the market wants. So he speaks to the people on the market, clients or the salespeople. The salespeople feed back a lot of their discussions with clients and prospects, but they don't know how to package it for the engineers to understand. But before you do anything, you just compile your list. You say, this is asked, this is asked. So you just do a list of feature requests. And then you need finance. You need somebody, and that's a marketing role as well, but somebody's going to analyze the market, say, okay, if we develop this instead of that today, what's the impact on sales and what's the cost of developing it? So you ask the engineers, tell me how much you need to develop this feature versus these three different features, and it's
Yeah.
in the end it's a calculation, and that's what we did. So we established a product group, and every week the product group meets. We discuss the future versions, what has been developed, the future requests, and sometimes we have projects. A project comes in and it has a cash impact. Do you need the cash? Because maybe you didn't get the funding you're requesting and you need to show some sales. So you discuss this and then you take decision based on very, very deep and precise elements, and that's key.
Oh my, in that product development cycle, it is because if the SAM is not large enough and if you don't break even, your burn rate then is a term that we hear a lot as
Yes,
well. That's really the problem that companies need to understand. You can't continuously operate in debt all the time. Eventually, either you close the doors, you sell the company, or you raise funding, and that's a cycle that most businesses have to deal with. I'm not saying that that's not reality,
it is.
but that also creates a problem or an illusion in traction sometimes because you look at this SAM as a relationship in any of the examples that we just talked about, sports federations, national governing bodies, and you're cautious because I've heard you say this, the golden ticket. You're cautious about over relying on them because is that real business or not real business? I've experienced that. I remember I was so proud to get the shield and the rings for the Olympics women's and men's soccer team back during the 90s with you. They were a Dartfish user, and they overlapped the CSV file from our heart rate data, so
Yeah.
we could be cool and geekish. But the biggest thing that I realized was I expected all the academies. I expected everyone to but the reality is a lot of these coaches still rely on a whistle and a stopwatch, and that's how they monitor intensity
Yeah.
and training.
Yeah. And they
So
didn't see the value of spending the time filming, gathering the HR. I remember
yeah,
this, and it was so easy. You had a beautiful CSV file by Polar. You would overlay, and then you could, track people and say, wow, and it's being used. But the the benefits to the normal coach of a normal academy and even Division 1 and 2 college teams were not high enough for the coach to say, you know what, I'm going to spend my time, because it's not only the cost of the technology, but it's the time to do this. So I
yeah,
mean, now with AI, and a lot of these services can be completely automated. I think it could help, but still, you still have to have someone who's going to analyze the reports or read the reports. Do I have enough time? And again, we go to the pain point. Is that going to
yeah,
make me win?
yeah,
There are two reasons coaches buy technology. They want to secure their job, and for this, they need wins. And they want to win, they need to attract more athletes. So we are lucky is with Dartfish, a lot of coaches were buying Dartfish just to say it's being used at the Olympics. You saw it on NBC. We have it here, and they would use it in their video to recruit athletes, and it was one of the selling points we had. It's like you become cooler by showing what it's being seen on TV. Uh, but is it the best reason to buy technology? I don't know. It's one
no,
of the reasons we used because it was cool and they really used it. Uh, However, if you don't help them win more medals, win more matches, secure their position, get more funding, for their programs, you they're not going to take it.
that adoption and the budget cycles and the brutal reality that you're burning through a runway is really what we're talking about. The honest advice for me is, people have to understand you took when you started with Dartfish and you exited out of Dartfish. How big of a company was it at that time?
Darfish has always been, for the past, I would say, 20 years, a multi-million-dollar company. I cannot disclose, the revenue.
Yeah, no,
But I
but
mean,
you
the,
you
the, the beauty
you've
is at one
consistently
time we had
grown.
70% of the medals won at the Olympics were won by Dartfish users. And now, I mean, I've been away for 5 years. I keep track of what they're doing. What I've seen is, they are going deep into the VAR, the video replay system, which is important, for the referees. And they are servicing countries that cannot afford the big systems. So the beauty is having a core technology, the core video technology they have, understanding processes and then answering these processes with products. So they do it nicely, and it's what I'm glad is when I left, Dartfish did not collapse, and that's always important when you create something that you developed and you put all your heart and soul. You don't want the company to collapse because because a few people left. And amongst the five founders, I think one is left within the company. So that's a sign of success for me, is being able to say the company is still doing well and profitable, and they are stronger in Europe than in the US. We know that. I mean, they're based in Switzerland. The HQ is in Switzerland, and they did well in Brazil as well.
Interesting. Results and retention is really what talks
Yes.
for a business, because at the end of the day, you know, this founder story where you an entrepreneur and you're creating your business model, uh, these basic framework, really, you don't, there's no other way of of mapping it out. If there was, I'd be interested in learning it, but it, it's 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 that development of having what's your total attainable market, what's really attainable for Sam, and then identifying your mission, your character, your why for having this company, and is it big enough? You know, and wrapping it up with, are you going to do the R&D? Because once you do an MVP, that doesn't mean that you're done. You know, regardless if you're even a software or a hardware or both, you
No,
know, you're
I
not
agree.
done.
And an important,
Const,
uh, sorry, go ahead.
constantly evolving.
Yes. So when I've seen, corporations launching in sports tech and not having their own CTO, saying, "Oh, we can completely outsource the technology." And that's a point that is very important. Is if you're in the technology business, you need to have your own CTO. You need to have your own development team. You cannot outsource it. You need to own the DNA. You can outsource part of it. What the mistake you should not do is rebuild what exists. If you can buy it, buy it. If you can find it on the internet, just use what you find. But the core tech you have, you should own it. You should have IP for it, and you should always have the core development team within the company. Don't outsource that. I've seen people trying to do that, and you may have different engineers every month because you outsource to a different company. Then they may use it against you. It's you can get into all kind of problems. So you need to own uh, the core technology.
That's a big financial change, though, right? If you the opposite argument is I can globalize this, take this off the shelf, and then just control the programming, control the coding on my side, and the firmware updates. But it's an off-the-shelf product, and I'm
Yeah.
just using my own firmware.
But you
You
said what
know,
is important. You program it on your side. What I
yeah,
call technology is you program. If it's software, if you buy the hardware, you buy the pieces. Uh, Make sure you have different sources. Let's say you have you have a
contingency
sensor.
plans.
Let's say you launch a vertical jump device, and you need a sensor for that. Make sure that you can buy it in different places. But the code to develop what you want to develop based on what the sensor gives you, that's what I call having your own technology. Don't outsource it. You need to
Yeah,
own something that is unique. That's the value, that's the IP that basically going to make the value of the company is going to be users, the revenue, the brand. People forget about the brand. We're
oh
talking
yeah.
to uh, a smart device company this week. I'm not going to name them, but it was a very popular brand back then, and new users don't even know about it. And you have, when you ask people, do you know this brand or that brand or that brand? A lot of companies completely forget to invest into the brand. And if I tell Dartfish to many people today, they still remember because we really worked hard on making sure that our clients were well served, that they were happy, that my partner at SportsEdTV is an amazing Robert Mazzucchelli. He's an amazing brand specialist, and he's launching a new book, by the way. Free advertising for him. It's called The Long Game. But the long game means yes, yes, branding between the
Another good book.
yes,
If you follow Victor, he shares what he's reading sometimes. So this was actually on my to do, but I told you about it.
yes. And a brand is a promise. When I hear a brand, I know what the promise is. And my partner always, it takes always this example. He takes a rose in his hands when he's on stage. And he says, if I give the rose to someone, what is the promise of a rose? It's love. It's a flower. You know what a rose represents. And a good brand, that's what, you need. And a lot of people, especially these days, all they want is clicks. So they're like, they launch a new product. Let's take a smart device, and you have so many of these smart devices. And by the way, you did a great job, speaking about the leaders on the smart devices. But they
Thank
launch
you.
it. They're like, wow, we have 50 million people, or 10 million people, or a million people are buying the device. We have a brand. But if you don't work on building the brand as an exercise and making sure that people remember that, wow, this is the Whoop, or this is the Ura, or this is the Loop, or this is, whatever brand you have, you're never going to win. And you're not going to
Yeah.
win against these cheaper products that keep coming out and compete on your market. Clicks are
It's
good.
a race to the bottom, though. I always tell people, like, you could find it cheaper, but when you start accumulating the operating expenses that catch up to you, the customer support, the failure rates, the returns, I'll be here. I'm not going to take it personal. You know, it is, I understand people have to make a business decision, but what ends up happening is people realize that if you could reduce the operating expenses by having a consistent experience,
Mhm.
that also represents the brand. That's why brands sometimes last. You
Yes,
know, they last because it works.
it
You
works,
know,
and the support. I mean, the support is so important when you have a
yeah,
technology product. Being able to call. I mean, let's say you have a competition. I remember we had a lot of softball teams and baseball teams using Dartfish. They were doing a match tagging live. They had a glitch. We had a hotline they could call, and they appreciated so much. We had the Olympics in Japan, people calling, say, hey, I'm sorry, I have this problem, middle of the night here. No problem. We are here for you. They'll remember that forever. If you don't have that, you just drop a tech product and say, hey, you just read the user manual, then you don't, you build your brand like this, it's not going to last for a long time.
no, I think embedding yourself in environments like that, even if it's remote, like you talked about, I would have probably fought for an embedded Japan role, but Japan's beautiful.
Yeah, I've been to many Olympics helping teams.
Yeah,
You have to.
I bet, because I remember, that was the one thing. I think it would have been interesting to see back then if we had the social media, what you could have done at that time with all the footage that you guys could have gotten, because I think that would have even exploded, and it would have been a bigger growth cycle. Because that's really the difference now with a lot of companies. They might have a great product marketing, but what ends up happening is the challenge for that company eventually is to you talked about great support and usability and reliability.
Yes.
And if those things don't happen, then we're not going to see companies stand the test of time.
You
So
can have we had Mbappe, the football player at one time using Dartfish, and we were so happy. And, and you even showed a screenshot. It's cool, but if people see it, then it helps. But again, the fundamentals of what makes a brand are key. Otherwise, you're not going to last. And we have seen companies come and go. I mean, great brands, right? Look at Kodak.
yes,
Kodak
yeah,
didn't. I mean, Kodak didn't. They didn't fail because of a branding. It
no,
was a different. They completely missed the boat on the technology side. But
that was engineering hubris
yes,
because they had digital camera technology before it was become
yeah,
common. But the guys on the film side said, but our reoccurring cash flow is over here. Don't you dare touch that. But they didn't
yeah,
like it's like, okay, guys, we've already saturated the market. Our TAM's not going to get any bigger. Why don't we do product, launch it but if we notice there's an impact on film, we'll adapt. And that never happened. And they completely Fuji came in and other competitors came
Sony,
in
Sony,
and listen. Yeah, Sony too.
yeah,
They all listened. They all listened to it like, hey, I'd love to have to be able to see my picture at that time because I have to wait and see if it was a good picture that I took.
yeah. I miss
You
it.
know, so
I miss sending the rolls to the post office, and 2 weeks
I,
later seeing the pictures. You know, it's today you don't have a bad picture because they you keep deleting them. But that's a different story.
yeah, yeah. I used to love taking black and whites. I had an old Pentax camera.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, yeah. I've really enjoyed this. I would love to do a follow-up on this. I think there's an opportunity to really talk about um, the stage that of branding itself, and have a larger discussion just about that.
Yep.
So I'll propose something to you, and then we'll see how that, if you're open to it,
Well,
and if we can get you back on,
we'll
that would
invite
be
my
awesome.
partner, Robert, because
I think
he's
so. It would
launching
be
his
great to
book.
have a panel
He's
discussion.
launching his book
Yeah,
called The Long Game, and he's a branding guru. I learned a lot with sports and with doing SportsEdTV with him, and why a brand is important, and for every company, a brand is an asset. People underestimate the power of a brand.
yeah. People look at either mimicking and copying and launching a company and failing to see there's no character, there's no authenticity then.
Hmm.
There is no, it's important. The branding is character, authenticity. It humanizes the brand, it humanizes the company, so people can relate to it and say, "This is what I want to buy because I believe that their intent is part of who I am and what
It,
I am."
it's a promise. When
Yeah,
you look at the brand, you know what you are getting, and a good brand. Look at Coca-Cola, to name a small brand, right? The biggest asset on their balance sheet is the brand. But
yep,
you think about Coca-Cola, you're like, okay, it's gonna refreshing. I'm gonna get a great drink, Coca-Cola, or it can be Sprite, but you know what you are going to get. You may like it or not like it. It's still the promise. And same with Apple. Apple is one of my favorite brands. I mean, you know that you're going to get a phone that works. That is easy to use. Same with an iPad or a Mac.
yeah.
And these are the very powerful brands that are just amazing.
And if you speak to engineers, they're going to say it's so limited, Apple. That's why I do Android because it has better specs and better. But
Yes,
I don't care about specs.
Android they do a good job, but the problem is, you have a lot of different manufacturers, and
Yes.
then again they have to say, okay, these manufacturers want this and they want that, and that doesn't make the ecosystem as powerful as
No.
controlling everything from A to Z.
And you have to do, bringing reference to what we're talking about, you have to do both because if you just do Apple, then your market just got smaller.
Ah, yeah, that's for
So,
people developing apps. Yes, you have
yeah,
to, because it's
yeah,
50-50. At the beginning,
yeah,
Apple launched the app, it was only Apple. When we launched
yeah,
Dartfish Express, the app we had, we only launched on Apple first because, for our market in the US, that was the one making sense. Then when we expanded to Asia, Android was, number one. We even thought about doing Windows at one time. That was years ago.
yeah. That's such a headache working with Windows. It's easier just to do the two Android because that's you do it, but there's so many now ways, very interesting ways of integrating.
Yes.
And I think even the AI side of this as well is something that you, when we started, data was just everywhere, and it still is. But now we have the ability of aggregating a data lake and orchestrating that into special agents to
Yes.
be able to give you predictable outcomes. And I think this time now, with all the um, fast-moving technology, Claudebot, and any Anthropic product that you see out there, um, it's doable. You just need to have better prompt engineering, and it is throwing the market into it's really drastically changing the business discussion that we're having because the size of your company now is irrelevant,
Yes. I
and
know.
that scares, I think, everyone, right? Because what are we seeing? Employment rates, dollar values, gap, whatever value you're looking at, it's going to change the DNA of a company because I could have a 24/7 autonomous agent deploying an activity that I could have. So I could have a hybrid environment, but I could be the overseer, the
Yes.
orchestrator, and navigate. And that's really what I'm, in wrapping up my MBA about a couple of years ago, actually a year and a half ago. It from that time to now, it has drastically exploded. There's no other way to describe it. It was like it was the Big Bang, all of a sudden, and so much has come out. And I think that's what we're going to see now with athletic management softwares, and you're seeing even any other uh, customer relationship marketing, customer relationship softwares for companies. Everything is drastically changing. I could have 10 sales development people under me that are all autonomous. I could have, it's, I could have a whole marketing department it is, so you could technically have, and I haven't seen it yet, but a millionaire being a company of one, a solo entrepreneur.
Yes.
It,
Yes. If he finds clients that are real clients and not clones. Because if all the
uh,
jobs are replaced by robots, nobody's going to buy anything anymore unless you have the universal, check that Bill Gates was speaking about. And
yeah,
making sure that I mean, I'm the real Victor, but I might be an avatar that you're talking to that I just trained. And it's, it is scary
it's,
where, we have to be careful. I've seen things. I mean, it's really going, we are
yeah.
just at the beginning, we are scratching the surface, but it's just amazing what they can do now.
What scares me is the robots and the AI in conjunction. We
Yeah.
create Skynet, and there's a
Ah,
movie already about it.
but, you know, either this, either we should force the engineers to watch sci-fi before they develop everything, or we should tell the sci-fi people don't make movies anymore because the engineers will just keep developing what they see. But
Yeah.
it's
Which came first, right?
yeah.
No, it's great. Again, thanks for joining, and
Thank
I
you.
will look forward to the next conversation. And if there's any comments, leave them in the comment section. I'll leave the links for SportsEd TV and Dartfish for you guys to review. And then if you haven't been following Victor on his social channels, I also will include those as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Marcel.
Oh, wait.